It is 4:52 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, and three Bearcat G3 armored vehicles are rolling without headlights down a residential street in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. The street is called Saguaro Palms Drive. The building at the end of it is a family-owned mortuary. White stucco facade, a small lit cross above the entrance, a parking lot holding two black hearses, and a refrigerated panel van with magnetic funeral placards on the doors. The agents already know the layout. They have known it for 19 months. At 4:54, the strike commander keys his radio and says one word: execute. The first team hits the embalming room loading dock on the north side of the building. The second team comes through the rear vehicle bay. A third unit holds the street perimeter. 11 miles away, at a refrigerated transport depot on the edge of Mesa, a parallel entry team is making the same move at the same second. Same word, same silence, same dark. What they are about to find inside that embalming room will rewrite the agency's understanding of how a Sinaloa-linked trafficking network moved more than 1,400 kilograms of cocaine across 4 states without ever once triggering a checkpoint stop. The answer was the casket. The whole operation was built around the casket. This is how it unraveled. And it started not with an informant, not with a wiretap, not with a border interdiction. It started with a junior analyst at a desk in Tucson, Arizona, staring at a column of numbers that did not add up. The analyst's name, for these purposes, is Agent Reyes. She was 26 years old, 18 months out of the DEA's Diversion Investigator Training Program, and she had been assigned to a financial compliance audit of licensed mortuary businesses in Maricopa County as part of a routine money laundering pattern survey. The survey was not glamorous work. It involved cross-referencing state-issued cremation authorizations against county death certificate filings against funeral home billing records submitted to prepaid funeral plan administrators, stacks of PDFs, columns of permit numbers. On the morning of August 11th, 2024, Agent Reyes flagged one file, the mortuary at 4811 Saguaro Palms Drive, operating under the name Eternal Grace Memorial Services, had billed for a total of 341 cremations over a 14-month period ending June 30th, 2024. The county death certificate database showed 124 filings attributable to that facility during the same window. The gap was 217 cremations, billed, paid, no corresponding death certificate in the county record, no body. 217 phantom cremations. She flagged the discrepancy and sent it up the chain. It sat for 11 days. Then a senior financial intelligence analyst in the Phoenix Field Division, named Supervisory Special Agent Marcus Durbin, pulled the file, read Reyes's memo, and made a call. Either this place has the worst record keeping in Arizona, Durbin said later to his team, or they're billing someone for something other than cremations. That question, what exactly were they billing for, launched Operation Pale Horse. The first thing Durbin's team did was pull the corporate filings for Eternal Grace Memorial Services, LLC. The mortuary had been incorporated in Maricopa County in 2019, under the ownership of a man we'll call Victor Salcedo. Salcedo had no prior federal record. He had a business degree from Arizona State, a mortgage in Chandler, and 2 adult children. He had purchased the mortuary from a retiring funeral director for $380,000 in 2019. Funded through a small business loan, and the team would later determine a 6-figure cash injection from an undisclosed source. Salcedo was not the target, not yet. The target in the early weeks of Pale Horse was simply the money, where it was coming from, where it was going, and what the phantom cremation billings were designed to conceal. The prepaid funeral plan angle was critical. Eternal Grace was registered with 3 separate prepaid funeral plan administrators. Companies that collect premiums from customers who want to lock in funeral costs in advance. These administrators are lightly regulated at the state level. They handle large volumes of individually small transactions, and they move money in a pattern that is inherently difficult to audit. A single plan might pay out over 12 to 18 years in small installments, and refund requests, plan transfers, and beneficiary changes generate paperwork that buries the signal. What Salcedo's network had done, and this took the financial intelligence team 4 months to reconstruct, was register fictitious individuals as prepaid funeral plan holders, then bill the administrators for services rendered, citing the phantom cremation authorizations as documentation. The administrators paid out. The money moved into Eternal Grace's operating accounts. From there, it was layered through a vehicle detailing business in Tempe, a food truck LLC in Scottsdale, and a commercial property management company in Tucson. $94 million moved through that layering structure over approximately 28 months. One detail that stuck with me when I went through the financial reconstruction documents: the average payout per phantom cremation was approximately $433. Just enough to look routine, just small enough to avoid triggering enhanced scrutiny from the plan administrators. Whoever designed that billing structure understood financial compliance thresholds well, but the money laundering was only half the operation. The other half, the part that ultimately brought in the strike teams on Saguaro Palms Drive, was the cocaine. The link between the billing fraud and the trafficking came in November 2024 through a source that Durbin's team had not anticipated. The Phoenix Field Division had a standing liaison relationship with a Homeland Security Investigations Task Force monitoring commercial freight patterns at the Port of Nogales. In early November, an HSI analyst flagged a pattern in refrigerated commercial transport manifest. A cluster of licensed funeral vehicle convoys making interstate runs between Phoenix and distribution points in Texas, New Mexico, and Nevada on a roughly bi-weekly schedule. Funeral vehicles move on what the industry calls convoy routes, designated travel corridors used for multi-vehicle funeral processions crossing state lines. These routes exist for logistical reasons. Multi-vehicle funeral processions that include a hearse require coordination with state transport authorities, and the vehicles are issued convoy designations that, in practice, exempt them from standard commercial vehicle inspection stops. No patrol stops, no weigh stations, no cargo inspections. The network had seen that gap and walked a cartel supply chain straight through it. Here's what this tells us about how modern drug trafficking actually works. The most durable pipelines are not the ones built on speed or volume. They are built on legitimacy, on paperwork, on the social trust embedded in institutions. In this case, the deference afforded to vehicles carrying the dead. That trust became the delivery mechanism for 1,400 kilograms of cocaine. The HSI data gave the Pale Horse team a critical piece they had been missing: physical movement. Now they needed to connect the movement to the product. This is where the undercover phase of the operation began. In December 2024, a DEA undercover agent we'll identify as Agent Torres was inserted into the network, posing as an independent contractor for hearse fleet maintenance. The cover was carefully constructed. Torres had a fabricated business registration in Maricopa County, a rented shop space in Mesa, a website, a cell phone number, and 3 years of backstopped employment history as a certified mortuary vehicle technician. The insertion point was a vehicle maintenance contract. Eternal Grace had recently lost its regular mechanic, and the network's logistics coordinator, a man we'll call Eduardo Vargas, was sourcing a replacement through word of mouth in the regional mortuary supply community. Torres made contact through an industry referral, submitted a bid, and was brought on in the second week of January 2025. For the first 6 weeks, Torres's role was entirely mundane. Oil changes, brake inspections, tire rotations on the 2 hearses and the refrigerated panel van. He documented everything. He noted the van's modified refrigeration unit, a standard mortuary cooling system that had been retrofitted with a secondary chamber behind the primary cargo area, accessible through a panel beneath the floor-mounted casket roller track. He did not touch the panel. He photographed it and filed the report. On February 14, 2025, Vargas asked Torres to accompany the refrigerated van on a run from Phoenix to a mortuary supply warehouse in El Paso, Texas. The stated purpose was a casket delivery. 2 units sealed, pre-addressed for a client family in Doña County, New Mexico. Torres accepted. He was wired. The run took 11 hours. At no point during the 11-hour drive did any law enforcement vehicles stop the van. No commercial vehicle inspection. No checkpoint query. The convoy designation on the windshield and the funeral home placards on the doors were sufficient. Torres later testified in the grand jury that 2 state troopers passed the van going the opposite direction on I-10. Both times, the trooper made no move to intercept. The El Paso delivery was clean, meaning from a law enforcement observation standpoint, nothing actionable occurred at the destination. The sealed caskets were offloaded at the warehouse by 2 men Torres had not seen before. Torres drove back to Phoenix alone, but the run had established one critical fact. Torres was now trusted enough to be included in a logistics operation, and the secondary chamber under the casket roller track had been locked on the outbound trip and unlocked on the return. Something had been removed in El Paso. Obstacle number 1 arrived in March 2025, and it nearly ended Pale Horse before the operation reached its peak. a confidential informant who had been providing low-level intelligence on the Vargas logistics network, was arrested on an unrelated state drug possession charge in Pinal County. During his booking, the informant, panicked, facing a mandatory minimum, told a Pinal County Sheriff's deputy that he had information about a DEA undercover operation targeting a funeral home in Phoenix. The deputy logged the statement. The log was not immediately flagged for federal review. It sat in the Pinal County system for 9 days. 9 days during which, if Vargas or Salcedo had a contact inside the county system, the operation could have been burned. Durbin later described those 9 days as the longest of his professional career. The Pinal County log was caught by an HSI liaison officer on a routine cross-agency data sweep on day 9. Within 4 hours, Durbin had the informant transferred to federal custody, the log was sealed, and a risk assessment of Torres's cover was completed. The assessment concluded that Vargas had not been alerted. Torres remained in place. The operation moved forward. The Title III wiretap authorization on the Eternal Grace dispatch line came through on March 22, 2025. Following a sealed application to the U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona. The affidavit supporting the application ran 214 pages and included Torres's undercover reports, the HSI freight analysis, the financial intelligence reconstruction, and 17 hours of consensually recorded conversations between Torres and Vargas. The dispatch line was the operational nerve of the network. It was used to coordinate casket pickup and delivery schedules, to communicate with the prepaid plan administrators, and, as the wiretap would reveal, to pass coded shipment confirmations to a logistics coordinator we'll call Marco Ibarra, who operated out of a warehouse complex in Henderson, Nevada. The code was not sophisticated. Shipment confirmations were phrased as casket specifications, interior lining color, handle finish, wood type. Mahogany with brass hardware and ivory lining meant a full load, approximately 40 kilograms per sealed unit. Oak with chrome hardware and white lining meant a partial. Cherry with pewter hardware meant the run was clean. No product, just legitimate funeral freight. The wiretap ran for 61 days. It captured 143 hours of usable audio. It documented 14 individual convoy runs, 9 product confirmations using the casket spec code, and, most critically, a conversation on April 11, 2025 between Vargas and an individual the team identified as a cartel logistics supervisor, in which the supervisor referenced the location of the operation's primary cash reserve. He called it the Vault at the Garden. The garden was a reference to a mausoleum. Specifically, the private mausoleum of a memorial park in the northeast Phoenix metro, a facility that Eternal Grace had a standing maintenance contract with, which gave Salcedo's employees regular access to the interior of the structure. Agents from the Phoenix Field Division conducted a covert physical inspection of the mausoleum on the night of April 19th, using a search authority obtained under seal. Inside one of the interior niches, a decorative vault unit behind a removable marble facing, they found a rolling equipment case. Inside the case, $6.2 million in banded United States currency. Durbin later described the moment his team relayed the find over secure radio. "We just stood there," he said. $6 million in a crypt in a suburb of Phoenix. They photographed the cash, documented the serial number ranges, replaced the marble facing, and left the money exactly where it was. They needed it to stay there until they were ready to move. By May 2025, the Pale Horse investigative team had grown to include 41 agents and analysts from the DEA Phoenix Field Division, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, HSI's Tucson and Phoenix offices, and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The case had been assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Arizona for prosecution, and a federal grand jury had been impaneled under seal since April. The indictment would eventually name 38 individuals across 4 states: Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and Nevada. The charges would include conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering conspiracy, operating a continuing criminal enterprise, and for the 5 individuals identified as senior network leadership, engaging in a pattern of racketeering activity. What's most surprising about this case isn't the scale of the money laundering or even the casket delivery mechanism. It's how long the network operated in essentially plain sight. Eternal Grace Memorial Services was a licensed, state-inspected, publicly listed funeral home. It had a Yelp page. It had 3-star reviews. It hosted bereavement support groups on Thursday evenings. The social legitimacy of the mortuary business was not incidental to the operation. It was the operation. The problem for Durbin's team in May and June of 2025 was timing. The grand jury was advancing toward indictment, but the team needed to ensure that the simultaneous raids on multiple locations across 4 states could be coordinated to prevent any single defendant from receiving word and destroying evidence or fleeing. Obstacle number 2, the Ibarra warehouse in Henderson. In June 2025, DEA surveillance of the Henderson facility observed what appeared to be a significant reduction in activity. Fewer vehicles, fewer personnel, lighter freight movement. The team's read was that Ibarra had become spooked, possibly through his own operational security review. If Ibarra moved his operation before the raid date, the Nevada thread of the network could be lost. The solution was calibrated. Durbin authorized Torres to contact Vargas and propose a larger than usual casket delivery run, a fictitious bulk order that would require Ibarra's warehouse to stage additional product. The proposal was just credible enough to draw Ibarra back to normal operational tempo. It worked. By the second week of June, Henderson was running at full capacity again. What do you think? Did the investigators play that right, or did they take an unnecessary risk by pushing deeper into the network right before the raid? Tell us in the comments. The arrest warrants for all 38 defendants were signed by the U.S. District Court judge on the evening of Monday, September 8, 2025. The raid date was set for Tuesday, September 9th. The coordination required was significant. Simultaneous entry operations were planned for the Eternal Grace Mortuary on Saguaro Palms Drive, the refrigerated transport depot in Mesa, the Ibarra warehouse in Henderson, Nevada, a stash house in El Paso, Texas, a vehicle storage facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Commercial Property Management Office in Tucson, and the Memorial Park in Northeast Phoenix, where the Mausoleum Vault was located. 7 entry points, 4 states, 1 command clock. Here's a take that will probably get some pushback. The loophole that made all of this possible, the funeral convoy exemption from commercial vehicle inspection, should have been closed years before this network ever used it. Federal transport authorities have known since at least 2019 that the exemption creates an inspection gap. The argument for keeping it is that stopping funeral convoys at way stations is undignified and operationally disruptive for legitimate funeral homes. That argument is not wrong. But this case shows what the cost of that decision is when a cartel finds the gap before the regulator does. On the night of September 8, 2025, Torres made his last contact call to Vargas, a routine maintenance scheduling call, covering for the wire. He drove away from the Eternal Grace parking lot at 9:47 p.m. and was extracted from his cover identity before midnight. He had been inside the network for 8 months. The strike team staged at their positions beginning at 2 a.m. on September 9th. Bearcat G 3 units, tactical entry teams, DEA agents in full tactical gear, arrest teams in unmarked vehicles positioned near the residential addresses of defendants who were expected to be at home. At 4:52 a.m., the command clock hit 0. Execute. The North team hit the Eternal Grace loading dock with a hydraulic ram. Door off its hinges in under 4 seconds. The rear team was through the vehicle bay before the alarm had finished its first cycle. Inside the embalming room, 2 men, a casket prep station, a portable electric drill, a case of sealed 1 kilo packages wrapped in black industrial plastic. 3 people were taken at the facility, including Victor Salcedo himself, who was found in the administrative office at the back of the building, sitting at his desk with a cup of coffee, apparently awake. He offered no resistance. He said nothing. Agents described his expression as flat. 11 miles away, at the Mesa depot, the entry team found the refrigerated panel van loaded and engine running. The driver was behind the wheel, headphones on, apparently unaware of what was happening outside. 3 agents were on him before he could shift out of park. In Henderson, Nevada, the Ibarra warehouse entry team made contact with 6 individuals, including Ibarra. The warehouse contained approximately 600 kilograms of cocaine in staged storage, product that had not yet been packed into transit caskets, but was in the process of being prepared for the next convoy run, scheduled for Thursday. In El Paso, the stash house entry team found 2 individuals and approximately 320 kilograms of additional product. In Albuquerque, the vehicle storage facility yielded 4 hearses, 2 refrigerated vans, and approximately 480 kilograms of cocaine in transit packaging. In Tucson, the property management office was empty of personnel, but the financial records seized from the server room would ultimately provide the documentary foundation for the money laundering counts. And in Northeast Phoenix, a DEA evidence team pulled the marble facing from the mausoleum niche and removed the rolling equipment case containing $6,200,000 in banded currency, serial numbers matching the documentation from the April inspection. By 6:14 a.m. on September 9, 2025, 34 of the 38 indicted defendants were in federal custody. The remaining 4 were arrested within 72 hours. 2 in Nogales, 1 in Tucson, 1 at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport attempting to board a flight to Guadalajara. Total cocaine recovered across all raid locations, 1,412 kilograms, 38 defendants, 4 states, 178 combined charges. The post-seizure accounting took several weeks. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division completed its forensic reconstruction of the money laundering structure in November 2025, confirming the $94 million figure. The total amount moved through the Prepaid funeral plan administrators, the vehicle detailing business, the food truck LLC, and the Tucson Property Management Company over the 28-month operational period. The Prepaid funeral plan administrators, 3 companies, none of them aware they had been used as money laundering conduits, cooperated fully with federal investigators. Their internal compliance systems had not flagged the eternal grace billing because the individual transaction amounts fell below standard enhanced review thresholds. The administrators have since implemented cross-referencing protocols against county death certificate databases. One of them has publicly stated they are now auditing all funeral home clients whose cremation billing ratios exceed county average by more than 15%. Agent Reyes, the junior analyst whose flagged spreadsheet started all of this, was promoted to GS-12 in November 2025. Durbin's team received a commendation from the DEA administrator. Torres, whose 8 months of undercover work formed the operational backbone of Pale Horse, requested reassignment to a non-undercover role following the conclusion of the operation. The request was granted. Victor Salcedo pleaded not guilty at his arraignment in October 2025. Eduardo Vargas entered a cooperation agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office in December. Marco Ibarra is contesting the charges at trial, currently scheduled for the spring of 2026. Of the 38 defendants, 11 have entered guilty pleas as of the date of this account. Combined sentencing exposure for the remaining defendants exceeds 400 years of federal prison time. The mortuary at 4811 Saguaro Palms Drive is closed. Its state license was suspended by the Arizona State Funeral Regulatory Board within 48 hours of the raid. The building is currently the subject of a federal civil asset forfeiture proceeding. We track these cases closely, and one thing keeps coming back: the phantom cremation billing. 217 bodies that never existed ran through a licensed, inspected, publicly reviewed business for over a year before anyone caught it. A junior analyst on a routine audit assignment caught what state inspectors, plan administrators, and county health officials had all missed. That is not an indictment of individuals. It is a structural observation about the limits of compliance systems built around sampling rather than cross-referencing. We spent time going through the case documents on the funeral convoy exemption, the transport designation that let those hearses cross state lines without inspection. And what's striking is how little institutional attention it had received before Pale Horse. The exemption exists in some form in all 50 states. It serves a legitimate purpose. Stopping a funeral procession at a way station is genuinely disruptive to a family in grief. But the exemption was written before anyone seriously modeled what a cartel logistics team would do with it. The casket transport loophole that let those vehicles cross checkpoints unsearched still exists in every state in this country. Investigators closed 1 mortuary in 14 months. How many funeral fleets are crossing state lines tonight that no inspector is counting? Comment below, do you think federal regulators should close the funeral convoy exemption? Or is that a reasonable price for the dignity it preserves? We read every response. If you want the next case file the moment it drops, subscribe to the Bureau files so the next case finds you first. The detail from Pale Horse that I keep coming back to is not the mausoleum vault or the 19 months of surveillance, or even the casket delivery mechanism. It is a single line from the forensic accounting report, buried on page 47 of the IRS reconstruction. The phantom cremation that Agent Reyes flagged first, case number 1 in the 217 gap, was billed on November 2nd, 2023. The date of the billing, the Day of the Dead. Whether that was deliberate or coincidental, the federal indictment does not say, but it was the thread, and someone left it there.